Hey everyone, this is Noah, and today I wanted to bring you a guide for Blitzclique. The last guide I made for Chaos Ritual was pretty well received, so I figured I'm just gonna do more guides for decks that I'm currently playing, and today it is gonna be Blitzclique. Blitzclique is currently a roguish deck in the TCG Advanced Constructed, and it is probably the best deck in Genesis. And it is also just like Chaos Ritual, it's a deck that just doesn't function on one-card combos. In fact, this deck doesn't have one-card combos, but it does have a very interesting and fun playstyle, and I just wanted to share with you how to actually play it. So we're going to start, of course, doing the card by card, into combos, into interactions, rulings, all of that. Everything will be in the timestamps below, so if you don't care for the card explanations, you can skip right ahead, or you can watch the card explanations, and that gives me more watch time for my metrics. That is up to you, but don't feel forced to watch anything. I'm just here to share some stuff. But before we go into the first chapter, I just wanted to give a thank you to Dr. Blutdruck and Cybersif, which helped me with learning the deck. I'm going to link Dr. Blutdruck's Twitter below, so you can follow him if you want. And but that is all for the intro. Let's hop into the card by card. So let's walk you through all of the cards in Archetype. And first I have the low-level main deck monsters, being Surge, Drain, Emmy, and Crackle. And they all work very similarly. They all have an effect to summon themselves by popping a card. They all will lock you out of special summons from effect monsters, except from the hand. So that means no graveyard summons, no deck summons, and most importantly, no extra deck summons. And lastly, they all have a trigger effect when they're on the field and the card gets destroyed by a card effect. So starting with Surge. Surge can summon any Thunder by activating this card in your hand, targeting a monster on the field, destroying it. Then you can summon a Thunder, including yourself if you want. And on the field, if a card is destroyed by card effect while this is on the field, you can add a Blitzclique monster. And Grain works the same, just a bit differently. You can reveal this card in your hand, you target a spell trap, pop it, and then you can summon a Thunder from your hand. And then if a card gets destroyed while this is on the field, you can add a Blitzclique spell or the Blitzclique field spell, Hideout in the Sky column. Doesn't have Blitzclique in the name, but you can still add it with this. Then we have Emmy. Emmy, if this card is added to your hand, except by drawing it, you can reveal it, target a card in the field, destroy it, then summon a Thunder monster. And if a card is destroyed while this is face up on the field, you can add a Blitzclique trap. So, looking at all of these, pretty simple. Monster, spell, trap. It is even reflected in the color of the hair. So we have like yellow, green, and purplish. So that is very easy to memorize. And then we have Crackle. Crackle is your in-archetype hand trap. And Crackle says during your opponent's turn, you can, if your opponent activates a monster effect, destroy that monster. Then you can summon a Thunder from your hand. You can also summon this, but usually you want to keep it in hand. But sometimes you need the trigger, right? The trigger effect being if a card is destroyed while it's face up on the field, you can send a Blitzclique spell trap from your deck to your graveyard. That is the low-level monsters, but there is obviously still the boss monster, Whisker, and this card is incredibly strong. So Whisker, during the turn that a card has been destroyed by a Blitzclique card, you can reveal this card in your hand, and then summon up to 3 Thunder monsters from your hand, including himself, of course. And you summon them, and then you can pop up to that many cards on the field. So what does that mean? You pop something with a Surge, for example, and you have a Grain in hand with a Whisker. You can activate a Whisker, summon 2, and then you pop 2 card non-targeting. So if you activate it in hand, this is the last opportunity for your opponent to do anything. Otherwise, they'll just be summoned. You pop 2, and because it first summons and then pops, that means that anything you summoned with it will trigger from the pop. So this Grain will trigger just like the Surge that was already on the field will trigger. But it doesn't end here. If it's on the field and your opponent activates a monster effect, you can bounce a Blitzclique monster from your field, and then you negate that monster effect and destroy that card. So monster negate plus also still a destruction trigger. So very, very powerful card, and one of the big reasons why this deck is doing what it does in Genesis, but also as a decent rogue option in the TCG. So that is the monsters. And next we're going to spells and traps. And first we have, in my opinion, the most important spell, and that is Blitzclique Breakaway. So it has two effects. One of them is a bulleted effect. You can, however, only use one of these effects per turn. So you can use effect number 1, effect number 2, but you cannot use both bulleted effects like Yummy Surprise would. So if you activate this card, you can either place a Blitzclique continuous trap from your deck face up on the field, or you return a Thunder monster to hand and target one card on the field, destroy it. And then if this card is in the grave and the card is destroyed by a Blitzclique card effect, you can add it back to your hand. All of the spells have that effect. So the general game plan would be you activate this, you place one of your traps, and then as you play on, you will pop something, and then this comes back to your hand. And then you can set it for your opponent's turn to either place the other trap or to pop a monster, a card on the field. So that is Breakaway. Let's talk about the traps. First one being Alternator. It's a continuous trap, and the continuous effect is your opponent's monster lose 3 on attack and defense for every Thunder you have. But that is just the bonus effect. The other ones are really where it's at. The first one being the most important. Once per turn, you can shuffle a Blitzclique card from field or hand into the deck and then add a Thunder monster from your deck to hand. Not a Blitzclique monster, a Thunder monster. The shuffling is for cost, so if this gets ashed, you just lose the card. But if it gets ogred, you also lose the card. However, this card in the graveyard has another effect, being you can banish it from the grave to add a Blitzclique spell from deck to hand, or you add the field spell. So even if your opponent ogres this, you still get a search into something. The other trap is Blitzclique Return Stroke, and this says that Blitzclique monsters you control cannot be destroyed by opponent's card effects. So pretty nice into the mirror. And then the other effect is if your opponent activates a spell card or effect, you can bounce a Blitzclique monster you control, and you negate that effect and destroy that card. And the last effect in the grave says you can banish it from the grave to add back a Blitzclique monster from the grave or from the field to your hand. Generally, you don't want this in your grave, but just know that it has an effect there. And then we have the Hideout in the Sky, which is your field spell. And this gives all your monsters that were summoned from hand plus 500. And the other effect, the more important effect, is once per turn, you can give your opponent a token that is 2000, 2000, level 6 Machine Earth, and you add a Blitzclique monster from your deck to your hand. So what that means is you activate it, you give them a token, you add a Blitzclique monster, and now you have a spell or trap to pop, and you have a monster to pop. That's pretty neat. And the other effect, just as the other spells, if it's in the grave and the card gets popped by a Blitzclique card, you add it back. And then lastly, we have the Stepped Ladder. This is a continuous spell. If a card is destroyed by a Blitzclique card while this is on the field, you can add back one Thunder monster from your grave to your hand. And the other effect is once per turn, you can summon a Thunder from your hand, and then you pop this card. So that means if you activate it, you summon a monster, pop, this will trigger the monster already because you summon first and then you pop. So that is just an enabler for everything, and it also has the effect to add itself back if it's destroyed. If something is destroyed by a Blitzclique effect, then it's in the graveyard. So that is all the cards. Let's just talk about ratios real quick. This is a 3-of in every deck. This is in my deck a 3-of. I've seen one list that played 2 from a pretty decent OCG player, but I would play 3 personally. Emmy is a 1-of. You just cycle this with the Alternator, you bounce it back and forth. It's not really like a play starter because it just adds a trap. You want to trigger the search at the end of your combos. So that's a nice 1-of. Crackle is a 3-of. You can, however, side down to 1 if you're going first. And Whisker, in my opinion, I got asked if I play 3 or 2. I would always play this at 3. This card is incredible. This deck is not a 1-card combo deck, so if you just get any of these cards off, this is such a strong push, plus trigger, plus negate, plus everything. This just combos so well with everything, so I would not play this at less than 3. That's for the monsters. Breakaway, as I said, in my opinion, the most important spell, so that is a 3-of. Alternator is a 2-of, usually, because you want to keep one on the field, but sometimes you need one in the grave to banish it and add a spell, so 2 makes sense. Return Stroke is a 1-of, but it has to be 1-of between main and side somewhere. So right now I don't main this, I have this in the side, but if you feel like you play like a pure version and you need more sealing, then you can main this one. And yeah, but like most people are playing hybrid versions and play the one of this in the side deck. Field spell, it is a field spell that adds, so it's a 3-of. And then the step ladder is usually not seen. It is not a bad card, however. So I think if you are playing a pure version, this is an inclusion that you can make at a 1 if you want to. I've seen some people even play it at 3 in a pure version. You can play around with it. I don't hate that card. I definitely want to play it a bit more. But that is the card explanation, so let's move on to the next chapter. All right, so the important thing I want to talk about is everyone's favorite topic, and that is conjunctions. And this is very important because I've seen people advocate for plays that are not possible. So I just wanted to clear up how these cards actually work. So if you read these cards, they all, at least low levels, say you target a card, destroy it, and if you do, summon a Thunder. Also, you are locked. So, and if you do, and also are the important words here. And if you do means that you have to pop the card to summon a Thunder. If you don't pop the card, like I go Grain, target the Alternator, and my opponent activates Font the Virtuous in response to pop the Alternator, you will not summon the Grain. However, because it says also means that both things happen as far as they can. It means that you are still locked because you activated the effect. You just didn't pop, you didn't summon, but you are still locked into Exotic. So, one thing that I've seen people advocate for is to activate any effect, right? Any of the Thunders, target a card, get rid of that card, so that this card doesn't summon. And they think that because it didn't summon, the also doesn't apply, so you can normal summon it and then tribute it for a Colossus. That is not possible. You cannot make the Colossus here because you are still locked from the Exotic. If you activate Grain and your opponent activates Solemn Strike, this gets destroyed, of course, and now you are not locked because Solemn Strike negated the activation of that card. However, you also didn't activate a Thunder in your hand because the activation was negated, so you can still not make Thunder Dragon Colossus. Now, for the last scenario, if you go Grain, target a card, your opponent activates Dominus Impulse, for example, which only negates the effect, then and only then you can summon the Grain and make a Colossus, because you have activated effect of a Thunder monster in the hand, but your opponent negated the effect, and the part of the effect is that you are locked. So here you could make the Thunder Dragon Colossus, but not in any other way. So that is just something I wanted to clear up because I've seen people misread these cards, and I wanted to make sure that everyone is on the same page as if to understanding these cards. So let's talk about combos, and I just wanted to give a disclaimer. This is not a traditional spreadsheet deck. You already don't have 1-card combos, but even the 2-card combos are all dependent on what you have in hand, what the matchup is, are you pre-side, post-side, etc., etc. But still, I just wanted to give you a general gameplay loop so you understand what you want to do with this deck. And that being the Field Spell and Surge. Could also be Field Spell and Grain, and there are obviously different combinations here. You just play around with it and see where you get. But with this hand, you're going to activate the Field Spell, and here you already have a decision. You could normal summon this, and that means that if you activate the Field Spell to add, and they Ogre this, they will trigger your Surge. That plays around Ogre. But if your hand wants you to keep this card in hand because you need the trigger, then you keep it in hand and just activate the effect. So that's already one of the things. But here, let's just normal summon this, activate the Field Spell, we give our opponent a token, and we grab Grain. Now we can activate Grain, pop the Field Spell, and that'll trigger Surge. Surge will grab you Emmy, which triggers, summons itself, and pops the token. That triggers Grain and the Field Spell. You get the Field Spell back, you get Breakaway, activate Breakaway for the Alternator, and then Alternator, shuffle the Grain because you've already used it, right? and you have your spells in rotation now, and this one is nice on the opponent's turn to add another monster, and this one hasn't been triggered yet. So you're going to do that. You're going to grab the Whisker, activate the field spell again, and now you're going to activate the Whisker in hand, summon itself, pop the Hideout, and that will trigger both the Emmy and the Breakaway, which nicely also chain blocks the Emmy here. So you're going to get the Breakaway back, and the Emmy is going to trigger to grab you your Return Stroke. And I can set these two, and now you have a lot of interactions here. So first of all, you of course have the spell negate here, you have a monster negate here. If you pop anything, you will get to add a monster, you will get to add a trap. If you want to chain block something, you still have the field spell engrave. So if you, for example, want to chain block your Emmy Search or your Search, then you can chain block it that way. And you have the Breakaway to bounce like an Emmy, right? You pop a card from your opponent, and because Emmy has been returned to the hand, triggers, summons, and pops. You obviously have the Alternator, so the Alternator can grab you a Crackle or any of your Thunder monsters that you want to summon, right? So you could, for example, trigger the Emmy in hand, right, to target a monster and pop after you bounced her, and then you chain the Alternator, shuffle the Emmy back, and you summon like a Thunderclap Monk or rai-oh or whatever, because you don't have to summon Emmy yourself, just summon the Thunder monster. So very, very layered interactions here, and just a general gameplay loop that you want to go, right? You want to trigger your effects, get your resources, somehow get Whisker into rotation, have the Alternator here, grab back your Breakaway, and have a way to get to Emmy or also Crackle and so on and so forth. If you don't have the trap, you of course just try to get to a Crackle in hand or a Whisker in hand, and then you have more monster pops here. But that's just like a general rundown of what the standard combos should do. So we learned that we have actual synergy with any Thunder monsters, not just Blitzclique, because every one of your Blitzclique monsters can summon Thunders, and Crackle can do it on your opponent's first turn, and Alternator can add any Thunder monster. So there are some Thunder monsters that are worth looking into, and the most prominent one is going to be Thunder King rai-oh. If you don't know what this does, while it's on the field, neither player can add from the deck to the hand, except by drawing. And if your opponent would summon a monster, special summon a monster, you can send this to the graveyard and negate the summon and destroy it. That is for summons that don't start a chain, so like generic link summons, synchro summons, and all that. And this is generally the most popular and strongest target, which if I can give you an example, if you have Crackle and rai-oh in hand, and your opponent is on Sky Striker, they go normal summon Ray, and they activated a couple of Upstart Goblins and Desires and whatnot, and now they want to get a negate, engage because they don't have it, so they go activate Ray, special 0 effect to add. You can here go Crackle, pop the 0, and summon rai-oh. So what happens here is, if they don't have a spell engraved, they don't get to add, because as the 0 resolves to add, we have rai-oh, and no player can add from deck, right? So they cannot add the engage from the deck. And then in a new chain, the Ray will trigger to come back, of course. But we will check their further plays, because they have already used the Ray Tribute effect, which rai-oh cannot negate that summon. But if they try to go link off the Ray for a Shizuku here, you can use the rai-oh to send it to the grave, negate the summon, and because the Ray has already been used, they cannot summon it back. So they would probably have to leave the Ray on the field, but your rai-oh is already here and pressures a lot. And that was just one example of something rai-oh can do in turn 0, making him probably the best generic target. But it is not the only target. So, for example, there is Thunderclap Monk, which, if your opponent activates a monster effect, well, you have this special summoned card, which Crackle does. You can negate the effect and the activation and destroy it, and by tributing this card. And if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can special summon a Thunder from your hand in defense mode. So some synergy with the deck, but in my opinion, it is just worse than rai-oh. However, if you're on a budget, because rai-oh is like €6, or if you play Genesis, where rai-oh has points, you can play a Thunderclap Monk. He's not a bad card. Then we have the Astrasma Urania. And this card can summon itself by bouncing 1 or 2 monsters from your field and special summon it. You can only do that once per turn. When this card is summoned, you can reveal a number of monsters in your hand with different levels and negate as many cards on the field as you revealed. And if this card is destroyed by card effects into the graveyard, you can add it back. So this is obviously unofficial Blitzclique support. It's definitely a decent card. You can even bounce your Emmy and then you can summon Emmy again. Has some synergy there. And you can bounce your Blitzclique monster so you can activate the hand effects again, and so on and so forth. And it will replace itself because if it's popped, it just comes back. So this is a decent card for sure. Next up, we of course have Thunder King, the Lightning Strike Kaiju. This is just because Alternator can add you any Thunder. So if you're against a Towers matchup, you just go Alternator, shuffle a Blitzclique card, get the Kaiju, and give your opponent a nice little Kaiju that you can then pop. So that is a decent card. And other generic cards, Denko Sekka. This is a Thunder monster that while you control no set spell traps, neither player can set spell traps or activate spell trap cards that are set on the field. However, you should note that the first line of this card is cannot be special summoned. So you cannot go Crackle summon Denko Sekka against the back row deck. That is not possible. But it is still a searchable anti-back row card, which might be worth considering. And the last one is not a generic card, but it is Sword Rai-oh. There is a Rai-oh variant of this deck, which I will talk about in a second. But basically, Sword Rai-oh is interesting as a target because, A, if you have too much engine in this deck, you can Alternator, grab a Sword Rai-oh and start your plays by normal summoning Sword Rai-oh doing Rai-oh stuff. Or if you go second and you have Crackle Sword Rai-oh, you can just go Crackle, pop their monster, special summon a Sword Rai-oh, and then grab you an X Rai-oh, which is one of the best going second cards ever made. So just a lot of pressure while having this monster on the field. So that is just everything you need to know about generic Thunder monsters. Now, one card I wanted to talk about is the Alternator, because Alternator is actually such a flexible card. Not only does it search any Thunders and can do things like that, bridge it to Rai-oh or get you your rai-oh, it also has some implications just by the usage of the shuffle effect. So, of course, the shuffle effect can shuffle everything. So that can also mean that you can dodge things, an imperm or removal or whatever. But more importantly, it can shuffle anything. So your most important resource that you can't get back is the return stroke. So if your opponent, say, activates a Font the Virtuous in response to your return stroke trying to negate something, you will never get the negate through. But what you can do is you can Alternator, shuffle it back, and save it that way. And you just grab like an Emmy or a Crackle and you dodge the Font the Virtuous that way. And you can next turn, on your turn, you can grab back your trap either by the breakaway you get back from the grave or by Emmy pop something. So just Alternator to protect things is good. However, there's also proactive ways of using it. For example, you have Grain and Alternator. You can go Grain effect, target the Alternator, and then chain the Alternator. Shuffle back the Grain and grab any Thunder you want. For example, if you want to combo, you grab the Surge. Then the Grain will resolve. Pop the Alternator and summon a Thunder monster, being the Surge. And now you have the Alternator and Grave to banish, and then you can grab Breakaway or the Field Spell. And from here on out, you can do whatever you want with the Field Spell, grab the monsters you're missing, and combo from there. And lastly, if you have Breakaway in your hand, plus any card that is a Blitzclique card, and you want to play around draw, you can just go draw phase, Breakaway, place this, use the effect, and your opponent cannot draw you because you are in draw phase. So that is just a lot of things you can do with Alternator, but there's much more, and just feel free to be creative with this card. Now, for the last chapter, I just wanted to give you a rundown of the versions you can play with this deck, and the most popular ones are Form of the White, Rai-oh, or Pure. And let's just start with rai-oh, because rai-oh sounds the most appealing, and I also have played a lot of games with this version, and I just want to give you my thoughts on it. So, of course, rai-ohs are Pyros and Thunder monsters. Sword Rai-oh is a Thunder, so there's synergy there. And generally what you want to do with this is, let's say you have like a Surge or an X, or any access to your rai-oh cards except for Sword. Sword only gets you 3 level 4s, whereas Ice and X and Bonfire give you 4. So what you want to do is you want to activate the rai-oh, the Ext, send Eclipse Twins or whatever you need. You grab your Sword rai-oh, summon Sword rai-oh, grab Ice, and what you want to do here is you want to summon the Ice and summon the second sword. So now you've basically gotten all of the rai-ohs out if you're only on one Ice. And what you want to thin this out, because what you do here is you're going to go for a Dugaris, detach 2, draw 2 cards, discard 1. So you dig deeper into your deck for your 2-card combos, but also for the discard, you can, if you have an alternator, you can discard that one. And then with these two, before you actually try to start with any of your Blitzclique effects, you want to go into a detonator. And detonator pops cards, which triggers all of your Blitzclique monsters. And here you can just pop the Dugaris and play from here. So you get a free body to pop, you draw 2 cards, you discard 1 that can be useful. And Ext rai-oh is just a phenomenal going second card, and Sword rai-oh has good synergy with your deck. Plus, the rank 4 engine can give you access to things like Exaton Knight going second. Ext rai-oh can give you access to Valon, Aggregator, and Samuel. This card basically says if it's sent to the graveyard, you can target a monster in either grave and shuffle it back, so it's graveyard hate. So you have some utility here. Plus, you can also go Baguska, which is, for example, if you play Harmonia and rai-ohs, and if you're under Harmonia, you obviously cannot use effects of Xyz monsters, but you can just summon a Baguska, turning off your opponent's board, and your hand effects still work from your Blitzclique cards. However, you lose some grind game because you cannot trigger the surge effects on the field. And you can also play an Alimbertian. That is relevant if you have start sword. You would go normal sword, grab Ext, special Ext, doesn't matter what you send. You can send the Samuel, and Samuel shuffles itself back, and that grabs you the second sword, special sword. And if you don't want to gamble on Dugaris, you can just go for an Alimbertian, and that can grab you your Surge Blitzclique, which already has a pop target because the Alimbertian is on the board. Post side, you can add fun stuff like Retaliating Sea with this. So that is some of the advantages of the rai-oh version. However, I've played this version enough now, and my issue with it is, while it makes your going first better if you draw one of them, and Ext is phenomenal going second. Going second, Ice is decent, but it's very easy to interact with still. But these are not that great going second unless you draw it with a Crackle. Of course, you don't really have a normal summon in this deck, so you can normal summon this, and this demands an answer because otherwise you get Ext. So they're not terrible going second, but you can also just use the slots better. But the biggest disadvantage of these is this deck doesn't care about Fuvalos. This deck doesn't care about Nibiru. Now you do, because you've seen the line, right? You summon 4 guys, you make Dugaris, and then you try to use Dugaris, and then they can just nib you, and all of this stuff is gone. You have 2 nib cards on the field to pop, I guess, but if Nibiru is on the format, I would not touch this engine, I think. And of course, Fuvalos into Ice is really strong, which is why I advise you, if you play this engine, only play 1 Ice, and if you have 1 Fire, you grab Ext. And if you get Fuvat on Ext, you can make 1 Detonator or Dugaris, depending on what you need. You give them 1 draw, that's okay, but it's still annoying nonetheless. And of course, since the Blitzclique monsters lock you, you have to use the rai-ohs first, means that if you get drolled, you get drolled on the rai-ohs and not your Blitzclique main engine, and that is kind of painful. So that is the pros and cons of rai-oh. Now, this sounds like me saying a lot of negative things about rai-ohs. It is a good version. I never hated having the rai-ohs, but I also didn't think they were that needed when I played it. So that's it for the rai-oh version. And then we have the probably most successful version, and that is, of course, Fallen of the White. Fallen of the White, we don't really combo or anything with it. It just gives you bodies, a push, and since you don't do anything with your extra deck, you can just use it for Albas stuff. You don't use OG Albas, you just have this. And basically, if you, again, have these two, what you can do is Fallen of the White, send, summon, and here you can activate the effect to either immediately summon the OG Ecclesia, Or what you can do is you summon the Incredible Ecclesia first, synchro these two, you make the 3 Champions of Sword Soul. This one grabs you the Dogmatic Ecclesia, which you can now special summon since you have an extra deck monster on the field. You special it, you can grab your Fallen and Virtuous, and now you can go summon the Surge, normal summon. You haven't normal summoned yet, by the way, with this. And here, the cool thing is the 3 Champions of Sword Souls can target a card on the field, negate it, and if you have Albaz or Ecclesia in the grave, you can destroy it as well. So you can just go 3 Champions of Sword Soul, target your own Ecclesia, pop it, and that triggers your Surge. And you still have 1 Fallen the Virtuous to pop on your own turn, and you will get a Fallen the Virtuous in the end phase, and you have like another body to pop if you need to. So you have a lot of pops here. And it just basically is just more access to what is probably the best card in your deck, which is Fallen the Virtuous, because it just synergizes so well with everything you do. Additional to that, similar to how Raziel does Dugaris for card draw, you can play a Nadir Servant. And Nadir Servant is just more access to your Albaz. And you don't need to go into the extra deck, right? As I said, you can just go Albaz into Ecclesia. And one nice thing about Nadir Servant is you go Nadir Servant, you can send the Bucephalus at the Fallen of the White. Bucephalus will then send the Garura, and Garura draws you a card. So you got a card draw and a Fallen of the White, which is basically a better Pot of Greed, right? And then you go Fallen of the White, and you just do the thing where you summon Ecclesia, grab the Fallen, and then you just have stuff to pop, plus a Fallen the Virtuous coming in the end phase. Yeah, that is everything for the branded version. And lastly, but not least, we have the pure version, which I don't have any elaborate combos for this. I just want to talk about, you can play this deck pure. I don't think there's a huge issue with that. Of course, the power push with the Fallen of the White Dragon is very nice. But if you want, you can just go and play some more Stepped Ladder. You can play 3 rai-oh main deck and just have that as your normal summon. Is still a very powerful card in this day. And you can fill up the rest with whatever utility you want. For example, you can play something like Pot of Extravagance, which is still a very good card. You don't need your extra deck, especially if you don't have a side engine. So you can just play Extravagance for a Pot of Greed. Or even if you don't want to afford the Fallen of the White, you can just play a package of Nadir Servants and the Dogmatica Ecclesia the Virtuous, and just have this as an engine that draws you a card, plus gives you Fallen the Virtuous and a body to pop, which is not too shabby. So definitely still potential in just playing a pure Blitz version. But that is it for all of the guide. If you stuck around until here, thank you for watching. If you want to talk to me about this deck, you can join the Discord, you can follow me on Twitter, you can again follow Dr. Blue Talk on Twitter if you want. And that is all for this video, and I see you next time.